Good evening, Papua New Guinea, and welcome to another edition of Business PNG for the year 2015. In this edition of the OBG Corner, editorial manager of the PNG report, Marc Venditti, chats with the Chief Executive Officer of Kramer Ausenco, Frank Kramer.
Good evening and welcome back to the OBG Corner. Our guest tonight is Mr. Frank Kramer, the CEO of Kramer Ausenco, one of the country's leading engineering services companies. Frank Kramer comes from a generation that first batch that graduated from the University of Papua New Guinea, where he actually jump-started from there to study in Canada, where he completed his engineering studies. He came back 1 year before independence to put together what is today one of the most important companies in this country, and he has a lot to say about PNG, about his sector, and many more topics that we would like to discuss today. Frank, thank you very much for joining the show. Frank Kramer doesn't sound like a Papua New Guinean name, it's more like a European German name. So that has something to do with your background, I suppose, from Medang and the north of Papua New Guinea, where has a sort of a link to the old continent, isn't it?
Yes, good evening, Marco, and thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, the Kramer name is the legacy from the period of time when the northern part of Papua New Guinea, when New Guinea was a colony of the great German Empire. So my grandfather was German, and my grandmother and my father were Papua New Guineans, originally from northwest of Papua New Guinea, from Vuvulu Island, but I was born and raised in Medang and consider myself to be a Medang citizen, yes.
I see. You were one of the first batch that graduated from the University of PNG. At that time, there were no engineering studies, so you had to study abroad. But you brought a lot of that experience back in the country, and I think that stayed in your system of the idea of establishing that sort of cooperation and relationship with international companies. And you use that also as a philosophy for your business, I understand.
Yes. Marco, I've always wanted to become an engineer. From when I finished high school in Queensland, I had a good friend who was an engineer, and he inspired me to go on to become an engineer. So when I left high school, our university here was brand new, and the government brought back all Papua New Guinean students who were eligible for university entrance, and I did a science degree. Then, because we didn't have engineering schools in Papua New Guinea, I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to Canada, where I did my engineering studies. But I've always worked in private sector. Engineering has always been my focus, and no doubt, if I wanted to come back and work in a developing country like Papua New Guinea, then engineering really is the backbone to development of any up-and-coming young country.
Yes. From what we understand, most of the resource companies here, at one point or another, had something to do with Kramer Ausenco. Why is that?
Well, it wasn't easy. For quite a few years, when I started my practice, the market was dominated by foreign companies. All my competitors in the engineering services business were, very well-credentialed foreign companies in Papua New Guinea. So, like anywhere else, if you're a fledgling business, it takes a long time before your clients will have the confidence in you. So 5, 7, 8 years before really I started securing some serious clients, and as time went on and as my business grew, we started to do more and more work for the resources companies, and today I'm very proud to say that our drawings, our company names on documents with just about every major project in the country.
I see. Yours has been a successful story, personally as well for the company, but there remains an issue about national content in this country, and many opinion makers are saying there should be more of that. There should have been more of that also in the projects that been successfully launched in the past and completed in the past, but perhaps looking at the future, this is one of the issues that this administration and society in general should address. Do you want to explain that concept?
Well, clearly our government is concerned about national content in all facets of the economic activities in Papua New Guinea. I too believe that there's always room to improve, and I believe that Papua New Guineans are not participating in the economy to the extent they should. As the economy grows, as the level of sophistication in our market develops, as you get more and more Papua New Guinean entrepreneurs, it's not good enough to just have political autonomy. We need economic autonomy. So, and the only way to get more and more economic autonomy in the hands of Papua New Guineans is to involve more Papua New Guinean businesses in industry. That boils down to greater national content. Now, there's obviously a balance. I've worked for private sector all my life, so I understand that at the end of the day, the balance has to make economic sense. Right. But I think in industry, particularly private sector, I think there is definitely area for improvement, and I think we're very comfortable with working with international investors. I've always had international joint venture partners in my business right from day one. So I understand what it's like to work with international companies and where there is an international standard that you have to comply with. So we're very comfortable with that, and we are very, very keen to get more and more Papua New Guinean businesses into joint ventures, into more participation in the larger, more complex projects.
I see. This country is about to celebrate 40 years of independence, and from what I understand, at the beginning, it had more of a nationalistic approach when it comes to precisely this issue, but somehow got drifted away, that concept. But legislation are still in place, they just haven't been looked at or followed through, or how would you define that?
I think post-independence, when nationalism was very alive and well, and I think our political leaders were very, very conscious of supporting Papua New Guinean enterprises. And I was fortunate. My business was just a fledgling business immediately after independence. That in some ways, in more ways than one, did help my business grow. But I think as PNG matured, probably halfway through our 40-year period, we probably dropped the ball a little bit. And I don't think legislating things to the nth degree is the solution. I think creating a framework and policies that support Papua New Guinean participation, and then letting private sector work with our international counterparts to actually find an appropriate balance. And every project, the mix will be slightly different. Depends on the nature and complexity of the project. Yeah. So I think this government now, in the last 10 years, there's been an enhanced recognition that more and more national content should be recognized in the larger projects.
I see. When you say probably we dropped the ball at one point, what is the reason? Lack of capacity or political will?
No, I think capacity is probably one area within government. I think the bureaucracy maybe grew bigger than and more complacent than it should have been. Maybe private sector didn't put their best foot forward either. So if you make a mistake when you're partnering with an international counterpart on a serious project, obviously that will set the ball back some years. So, but I think the time is right now. I think the economic growth potential for Papua New Guinea is significant. I think the resources sector has matured to the point where there are more and more Papua New Guinean professionals working in the sector. Certainly mining there is, and now that we've kicked one very big goal with the PNG LNG project, then I'm aware that we're producing more and more petroleum engineers, and we're producing more and more mining engineers. So I think we need to work harder to find that right mix where there's enhanced Papua New Guinean participation in the economy.
I think you mentioned also specific measures. You suggested perhaps 25% PNG participation in every project. You think this is realistic? It is feasible?
I think 25% is not unrealistic. I think maybe between 20 and 30%. I would welcome the opportunity to get some of my counterpart professionals on the Papua New Guinean entrepreneurial side to work together so that we can meet with some of our international partners and find the right mix. And probably there is no one solution that fits all. I think, but each project should be looked at on its own merits, on the level of complexity, and together with our foreign investors, we should be able to find an appropriate level of cooperation between Papua New Guinean entrepreneurs and the foreign investor.
But foreign investors and foreign companies often say, well, there is no capacity in the market here, therefore I have to bring people from outside. And this is still, it is a valuable concept as well, issue. So there is lack of capacity, so it's hard to address that balance.
That's absolutely true, and my own business recognizes that. And so we bring skill sets that are not present here in PNG on projects that we work on as well. But I think there's a difference between bringing in foreign contractors, bringing in wholesale foreign components of the project when large elements of those projects can be actually subcontracted out to Papua New Guinean enterprises, and they're given an opportunity to bring those skill sets in. I think if Papua New Guinean business houses are working with those skill sets that are not yet present in Papua New Guinea, then that's the best way for Papua New Guinean business people to acquire those skills and embrace them and really learn from the experience.
I see. And what about other measures that you said perhaps PNG companies should have sort of a preference when it comes to new projects, new contracts?
Yeah, every government in every developed economy will give preference to their own business houses. I mean, if you go to Queensland, even they're very parochial about Queensland companies over and above companies from other states in Australia, not to mention international companies. So the concept of having a preferential access to contracts that are government contracts is not new. I've heard of policies where 8-10% of the assessment process, there's a preferential notional weighting to how you evaluate bids, and local companies can get preferential access to the extent of between 7 and 10% in how the evaluation process takes place, so that they're given a little extra advantage in the bidding process.
I see. And that you don't see that could hinder in any form or shape of foreign investment in this country, FDI?
No, most foreign companies will will be familiar with this process. In fact, in their own countries, they would have experienced a lot of large companies would have had support from their governments in their domestic markets as they grew up, and the larger they get, the better they are at in entering the international market. So I'm sure all the companies that a large number of the companies that come to Papua New Guinea would have experienced similar circumstances in their own country as they were developing and as they were growing. So I don't think it's a foreign concept at all.
I see. Frank, I think you are the perfect person also to talk about the importance of PPPs, private-public partnerships in this country, and especially when it comes to high-impact projects. We haven't seen many of those being implemented here, not at the speed that we would have expected to really sustain economic development. What can you say about that?
Well, our government has recognized that the government itself has capacity problems in delivering projects. Governments can make good policies, but when it comes to implementing projects, I believe private sector can deliver projects better than government. So
I think we all do.
There's an absolute classic case here for public-private partnership program, and the government's recognized that, and they've worked on developing a PPP program. I think the challenge now is for us to actually identify the projects where the delivery of such projects are more suited to PPPs, establishing some good examples and setting them up there so that we can recognize this is a better way to deliver projects than some old traditional ways.
I see. Can you give me an example of successful PPPs established here so far, and what further down the line could be a perfect example?
Well, we're really at just the beginning of the road of our PPP programs. There's been some suggestion that Bank South Pacific is a good example of PPP, and I've heard people talk about that. And while it's a great success story, I think PPPs are more where you have a particular problem, the government identifies it wants a certain outcome, it partners with private sector. The concept of how to actually get from the problem to the end product is a very conscious, deliberate set of steps, and you achieve an outcome. As much as the Bank South Pacific is a success story, and it's a great success story,
it doesn't really fit the bill.
It's not a true PPP because it was a small bank. It worked with government. There was a reverse takeover of a government-run bank, and I understand the actual asset that the government used to own 100%. Is that the combined smaller equity that the government now has in a much larger bank, which has been privatized, is worth more than the original asset that the state owned. So in many sense, it's a success story, definitely. But I think there are many physical projects and infrastructure projects and high impact projects that we can deliver through the PPP process, and that's really something I'd like to see more of. Yeah.
I see. Obviously, I can't resist the fact to ask you a couple of questions about another sector, even though today we touched some very important points about national content. Obviously, you are also the chairman of the National Petroleum Company, so inevitably I will have to ask you something about that, even though I might understand that some of those touchy and not easy subject to discuss, but everybody's waiting for the next wave of investment when it comes to hydrocarbons and third train and the new field and the involvement of another oil major in PNG. How would you assess the situation at the moment?
Well, the challenge with National Petroleum Company of PNG, NPCP, of which I've been honored by being appointed as the chairperson, is a great challenge. It's our first national oil company. It's a shareholder in one of the most prestigious and most significant, most complex projects that Papua New Guinea has ever built, led by a great North American company called ExxonMobil, which everybody knows about. And to Exxon's credit, they've delivered a great project for Papua New Guinea, and in many ways has totally de-risked Papua New Guinea. We were considered a country that's extremely difficult to deliver a large, complex project, and Exxon has demonstrated that you can deliver large, complex projects in Papua New Guinea. So it's great to see us having Papua New Guinea securing the services and participation of one of the leading companies in the Americas, and now we've got Total, one of the leading companies out of Europe, coming here to work on the next LNG project. And I'm proud to say that NPCP will be a partner in that project. The government's committed to exercising its backing rights at the time when those rights are it's appropriate for us to exercise that. And NPCP will be a very significant participant in that project.
I see. And having a European player in the market might change the balance somehow, or it's an interesting dynamic now creating, right?
I think having a super major from North America and now a super major from Europe, I think PNG is extremely well placed to get the best of both worlds, both of the developed OECD countries or regions. I think Total will have a real challenge to match the benchmark that Exxon has set, but I have no doubt that the best from Europe can deliver as good as project
best
as
from North America.
Yes.
And what about domestic obligation, which is somehow related to national content as well? This is a big issue and probably will affect also this project, I suppose.
It's exactly all about national content. It's exactly all about what domestic requirements Papua New Guinea needs for our own development. There's no point developing the best power project in the world if your own people don't have electricity. So when we've got to be conscious of value adding up the food chain, and so domestic gas contributes in the short term to some of our power problems, but in the medium term and long term, domestic gas will contribute to further value adding industries such as the petrochemical sector, and it'll create more employment. And as our economy grows, as our GDP grows, some component of domestic contribution from whatever the project might be, I mean, whether it be hydrocarbons or minerals, I think it will value add to the economy and employing more Papua New Guineans for generations to come.
There's been floating the idea that could be a 15% of the production for domestic consumption. You think that's a realistic figure and should be applied to every single project?
Well,
or is it more a la carte, according to?
I know the government is keen to actually, quantify a number and then impose that with a big stick. I come from a private sector background. I can't keep saying that.
We don't take the stick.
And in private sector, I'd like to see that there are incentives, the capitalist way of doing it, so that the economy actually generates the appropriate level of domestic participation or domestic obligations. So, but if industry does not recognize that the government does require this, that the medium term and long term demands of PNG requires such contributions, then no doubt government will legislate. But I'm hoping that industry will recognize that this is something that it's part of their corporate responsibility, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to lose money over the process. It can be still a profitable exercise, but our corporate responsibilities must be met, and so I think it will sort itself out.
I see. Frank, thank you very much. Frank Kramer is a sort of inspirational for us because he has 40 years of experience in his industry, but nevertheless he accepted to take a very big challenge of becoming the chairman of such an important institution, company in this country. So that really also gives a signal that business keep people alive, keep people on tiptoe, and that's a good signal and a good message to send to these new entrepreneurs that are coming out in PNG. There is a lot to be done in this country, and you are a clear example that things can be achieved, and the game doesn't end right away. It could stretch a long time.
That's absolutely true. I think after 35 years in my traditional engineering services business, the new challenge with the National Petroleum Company has re-energized me, and so I'm finding all the challenges to be really interesting, and I hope my 37 plus years of experience will contribute positively to development of a very, very important state-owned enterprise.
Very well. Frank, thank you very much.
Michael, thank you.
Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for watching this, and we'll wait for you at the next edition of Oxford Business Group Corner. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Welcome back. Amongst the many challenges of doing business in PNG, there are some striving entrepreneurs who aim to succeed in their various journeys of business. In this Entrepreneur Engaged segment, we feature Tumbi Security Services located in Vanimo and owned by entrepreneur Vincent Tumbi. The security service company is well known for taking care of Vanimo local businesses. We present Tumbi Security Services.
My name is Vincent Tumbi. I'm from Vanimo village. I decided to do my private business on the security because I think I'm experienced on the police force. I don't think I must be use my experience in the police force to run the security company. So I started security company with two men. We started off with Papindo on 30 August 2004 until today. Mi plaba go inspect mo location now. Long monem hab mi plaba walk long all premises. But mi plaba lera motors, bien ba mi plaba main wharf, bien ba mi plaba long airport, long any office. Ba mi plaba come back. That's why mi plaba come long inspect my location. Mi era motors. Come on main wharf. PNG Harbour Sport ba Vanimo. In our Vanimo land where they go Dumo, that's a sweat. That's a sweat. English they go sweat. So please not talk and too hard. It's that me no same. Man plus something long run. You know come up nothing. You hard work but you come. Let's mainly before the salaries. The salary is very important. I have to make sure I pay the security every fortnight. So make sure they must satisfy and they give me. Because that's a man. So every time when end of the month I live with maybe 5,000 appropriate for the month. But that's okay. It's not you didn't lose. But the main one, you have to pay your bills and security salaries. That's very important. Make sure dress up your security like you must have full uniforms, all these things, uniform, radio and buttons, sources for the duty. Then you meet the standard of the security. All this and notebook, pen, you must have all these things to the security guard. When he's on the field, he must have a radio to communicate with the base, all these things. It's very important. So I placed order for new uniforms from the Kingston from Lake with the whole set, uniform, shirt, trousers, and the shoe come together. It cost me about 32,000. I paid deposit already, so I'm waiting for the. They're doing now, and they send me an email for another deposit. Then they will deposit to me. So me display my security with uniform on the store, and they say the base, and they say Tumbi, and then that's a small town, and they know me because people in town they know me very well. They know me very well. So, and myself, I'm a good public relation, and you have to, you must be a good public relation for everybody. Like Papua New Guineans and whether he from white or black, you must be friend to them. Then you are a good businessman. Make a report long operation manager one time night manager to all the location all in a month. You know, man is short, or the work you right, so you know a problem. So me a mass na, but me must go maloro na city. So me losing something long operation manager, night manager work plan or report on night manager na a report on operation manager work plan on talk sabi me. So tonight report me kisi mas mo go work me 100%. You know got heavy long. Thank you.
And that's all we have for you tonight. For more business news, or if you would simply like to view this episode again, visit MTV online at www.mtv.com.pg. Or to join the conversation, like our page on Facebook for daily business news, or follow us on Twitter at Business PNG using the hashtag Business PNG. Business PNG will be on hiatus for the next 2 weeks due to the 15 Pacific Games. We will see you again on the 20th of July after the Games. Until then, the Business PNG team would like to wish Team PNG all the best during the Games. I'm Leanne Jarari, and this is Business PNG.